Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special town hall meeting. Of course, presented, powered, and organized by Mr. Nohar Singh and his Globespan 24/7 team. Globespan, of course, is a 24/7, they span the globe 24/7 to bring you news, views, movies, community and social events, sports, and entertainment to Guyanese subscribers. Again, my name is Salahuddin Nasruddin, known as Salim, and I'm your moderators for today's discussion. We have an exciting and informative discussion today for you. Today on Guyana's economy and the investment climate. There are a few audience live in Richmond Hill. We would like to welcome them. We would also like to welcome our global viewers from the USA, Canada, Guyana, and from around the world on Facebook as well as on YouTube to this special town hall meeting. If you, for online viewers, if you have a question, please write your questions in the comment area, and we will get to them as much as we can. Please, for those who are live in audience and who might be on a call with us, please do not interrupt or be rude to our guests. We'll go to a quick video right now, and I'll see you back in a few minutes.
19. And Mr. Speaker, just as an aside, when I inherited responsibility for this agency, it had never, Mr. Speaker, I repeat, it had never, since its inception in 2002, presented to this Assembly its audited financial statements. It did not even have audited financial statements for the years 2002 to 2014. And we have had to spend an inordinate amount of time and effort going back and putting this in order. But we anticipate that sometime in 2019 we will finally be up to date with the annual reports for all the agencies of the Ministry of Business.
Mr. Speaker, in rebutting the minister's budget, he said the environment in which he premised his budget. We are debating this budget also in a particular environment. And the environment in which we are debating this budget, sir, is where there is increased fear of ethnic discrimination in this country. We are debating this budget in that context, sir. We are debating this budget in an environment where there is real or perceived, whichever one you may wish to use, political persecution of political opponents by the government.
Well, Guyana's economy has always been stuttering, notwithstanding its resources and its people's hard work and struggles. For many years and now decades, our leaders have been unable to provide the good life which they campaigned on and swore to deliver once in government. The current APNU and AFC administration has come under severe criticism for its handling of the economy and the policy they have adopted since 2015. Observers, economists, pundits, and the business community have all agreed that the policies, strategies, and measures taken by the APNU and AFC government have been counterproductive. Meanwhile, the average man and woman continue their struggle, the struggle of making a living and providing for their family in an increasingly difficult and hostile environment. The economic policies of the APNU have led to very little growth of the economy, and in some cases, slowing or retarding. These policies realize significant job losses, higher taxes, underperformance of key sectors, and dwindling foreign exchange. Some have argued that this dangerous economic trend can lead to a recession, and precipitated the passing of the no confidence motion on December 21st last year. The Guyana Budget and Policy Institute, a US-based independent policy group, in their executive summary of their report on the 2018 budget states, overall, Budget 2018 is a poor piece of legislation that essentially mortgaged Guyanese's future and the health of the economy. Despite the record level spending, the budget failed to prioritize needed public investments to improve the level and quality of critical public services, lift family out of poverty, improve the quality of life, and grow the economy. The budget proposed no change in economic policy to stimulate the economy, even as growth continues to slow, jobs subside, and investors' confidence wane. In today's town hall meeting, we have the Minister of Business, Mr. Dominic Gaskin, and a leading opposition member of Parliament, Bishop Juan Edghill, who will help us to navigate the Guyana economy. And I would like to welcome both Minister Gaskin as well as Bishop Edghill. Good afternoon, guests, brothers, and fellow Guyanese. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Salim. Good afternoon to all your listeners and viewers, and to those gathered live at the town hall. And good afternoon, of course, to my fellow panelist, Bishop Juan Edghill, fellow member of Parliament also.
Great.
Well, good afternoon to you, Salim, and I bring greetings to all of our Guyanese, both here in Guyana and in the diaspora, wherever they're located, and many other citizens of various countries who are interested in what is happening in Guyana. I'm happy to engage, and I look forward for a fruitful discussion, and of course, look forward for the thoughts and sentiments and views of my colleague, MP, the Minister of Business, Mr. Dominic Gaskin, and I'm looking forward to where we'll be able to put proper context and perspective into what is happening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, both of you. And I just want to start off. There's a headline today in the Guyana Chronicle that states that this is for Minister Dominic Gaskin, that there's a 1.5 megawatt solar farm promised and a $4 billion international airport for Lethem. So, are you, the AFC and the APNU, actively in campaign mode with that sort of headline?
Well, you've put me on the spot. I don't think so. The Chronicle is an organ of the state media, and it reports on whatever the state or whatever the government does. And that's just one of many headlines that would have appeared in the Chronicle over the years. I have nothing to do with the Chronicle. I don't know that the Chronicle is a campaign, part of the campaign machinery. But as a member of government, we're always promoting what we do, and we're promoting Guyana, and we're promoting the good things about Guyana's economy, because I did.
But the headline came out at an interesting time when election is looming, of course, and the promise of a $4 billion U.S. airport in Lethem, and I doubt whether even our national airport is at $4 billion, the Chedijagan International Airport.
$4 billion US dollars? No, I think that has to be a mistake.
well,
that is obviously an error. It cannot be $4 billion US dollars for an airport in Lethem. No disrespect to the community of Lethem, but I don't think any responsible government would spend $4 billion on an airport in Lethem. Exactly, it is probably 4 billion Guyana dollars, which is closer to about 20 million US dollars.
And that certainly does make sense. So, and for you, Bishop Juan Edghill, I see on social media quite a lot of pictures of this huge session by the PPP talking about their manifesto and stakeholders contributing ideas and thoughts and so on. What could we expect out of that? Because that's a parallel headline out of the PPP camp. Of course, I know PPP is looking for the earliest possible election, but what can we expect out of that manifesto?
Well, let me respond to two things. One, it is no secret that the People's Progressive Party Civic, which is currently the parliamentary opposition, expects elections by March 19. So we will not be in denial that we are in campaign mode. We are in campaign mode. There is an election to be held
on or before March 19, 90 days since the passage of the no confidence motion. The government seems to be stalling. That's not something that we have not responded to. So there are two things. Today's activity, where we are consulting with more than 100 stakeholder organizations and entities, we're talking to them about Guyana's future. Because as a responsible political opposition, you always present yourself as the next government. And we believe that we will form the next government. So our broad-based consultation is to garner the views, to test our intentions, and to be able to build consensus around a broad range of issues. We're not talking to party supporters today. We're talking with civil society, the private sector, the religious leaders, and of course, there are some of our political operatives that are there, regional chairmen and representatives from various regions. So we are fashioning our process to include Article 13 of our Constitution, which requires that we consult with citizens through their organizations. Article 13 of the Constitution of Guyana provides to that, and we have adopted that as an approach. Having said that, I'm happy that Minister Gaskin has clarified that the Chronicle's headline is grossly erroneous, which is not something that has not happened before. It seems that they're having major problems with their editing at Guyana Chronicle. But just to tell all that are listening, even though the Ministry of Public Infrastructure went there and promised the citizens of Guyana a $4 billion, whether it's Guyana dollars or US dollars, airport, just indicate that I did the research this morning, having seen that headline, there are only 448 million Guyana dollars budgeted in 2019 for regional airports and regional airstrips. So what the minister did in Lethem was a campaign, propaganda, ice cream, promise, pipe dream, rhetoric, that sometime in the future, we're gonna bill you a $4 billion airport, whether it's US or Guyana dollars. This is just seeking to win hearts and minds. And this came hot on the heels of 19 ministers who are visiting Region 9 at this particular time. 19 out of 27 of the ministers are in Region 9 campaigning. So they are in campaign mode.
I think there are going to be promises on both sides, and a lot of candies will be shared over the next few months on both sides. So, and there are going to be errors made, I guess, throughout the next 3 months. So I just want to switch back to Minister Gaskin. Recent headlines out of Guyana seem to suggest a depletion of our foreign exchange supply. This is, of course, an alarming development. In fact, the trend is pretty dangerous and has, some dangerous consequences. From your perspective, and because you're heading you're a big part of the economy and the investment climate, and this does impact investment in the short term and the long term. What's the state of the economy and specifically the foreign exchange supply levels?
Okay, well, in terms of the state of the economy, as you would know, last year, Guyana's economy grew by 3.1%. It is expected to grow by 3.4% this year. The Caribbean Development Bank has just listed Guyana as one of the fastest growing economies in the region. This is in contradiction to the report that you read earlier, which painted a rather gloomy picture of Guyana's economy. And I think this is where the problem lies, that we are all looking at the same thing and reaching different conclusions. What I gave just now are facts. The economy did grow by 3.1%. It is projected to grow by 3.4% this year. This is not just government projections. These are, factual. These are facts.
Were these? Yeah. So I was just going to ask: were these the projected growth your administration was planning for?
3.1%. No, I think we projected 3.4% 4 or a larger amount last year. I can't remember, but it is not uncommon that we won't reach our projections. However, the 3.1% is real. The 3.4% is projected. And all the international organizations that, do estimations and do assessments of economic assessments have also assessed that Guyana's economy will grow between 3 to 4% this year. And there are good reasons for that. But I want to stick with the foreign exchange issue. And I want to go back to 2017, the beginning of 2017, when there was a similar alarm raised about the foreign exchange rate. And it was projected at that time that by the end of the year, it will reach $300 to 1. That never happened. And there's a lot of hysteria being drummed up about our foreign exchange rate and about the shortage of foreign currency. And it is most unhelpful because people hearing this and people reading this, immediately react. And the reaction, for anyone who either holds foreign currency is to hold on to it and not remit it or not exchange it locally. And for those who rely on foreign currency for trade and other purposes, is to buy up foreign currency. In addition, I think last year and before we did foreign entities with operating in Guyana with, let's say, unfavorable foreign exchange situations in their own countries, using Guyana as a means of buying up our US dollars and passing it over into their economies. So, but currently there is no shortage of foreign exchange. There is no reason to panic. Of course, this is likely to be an election year, and there is a lot of political, there's a political situation developing, and that, of course, creates some anxiety also, which we are trying to minimize because we must become a more mature democracy where our political problems don't spill over into our economy. Yeah. You have that in the USA and in Canada, where you are no strangers to political spats and political issues. But generally, it doesn't affect the rest of the economy. And we would like Guyana to be a country where elections or political differences do not spill over into the economic arena.
I would love to get the Bishop's response to your suggestion that it's just maybe hysteria or overstating of the FX, of foreign exchange supply. I know some private entities have published notices about the unavailability of funds, and if purchased, will have to be done so at a higher rate. So, Bishop, your thoughts on what the minister has just commented on?
Salim, and to all of our viewers, I could understand Minister Gaskin. He has to present an image that his government is on top of things, but I would ask him and the entire administration to come out of the bubble and to get on the ground and face the reality. The exchange rate for the US dollar this time is about 230 to 1. That's what is happening where business is taking place, about 230 to 1. There is an instruction, a circular, that is available where the governor and the central bank has instructed that you cannot buy and sell except I think it's about a $3 difference. And they have been doing things to stabilize the exchange rate. But the demand is great and the monies are not available. But this is not something that is happening in isolation. Let me explain. The APNU AFC inherited an economy that was buoyant. 10 years uninterrupted economic growth, averaging 5% per annum. 10 years. That's not PPP line, like the minister said. These are the international reports. 10 years, averaging 5% growth per annum. every year since this APNU AFC has been in office, they have not achieved their projected growth rate. The level of incompetence, mismanagement, and maladministration that exists is not helping investor confidence. And what is happening now is that we are heading slowly towards a constitutional crisis in Guyana. We have a no confidence motion that has been passed. A government has been defeated. There is great uncertainty in the country, and you cannot expect in an environment where the confidence that people need to have in the stability, the political stability of the country is under question, that you don't have some bumps and you don't have issues as it relates to your currency. And added to that, the underperformance of major sectors that brought in foreign currency, and this is not only sugar that has had a problem, but many other major sectors that earn foreign exchange, that brings to the economy, that makes foreign exchange available, we're having difficulties with that. So what is happening is that monies from our foreign reserves are being dumped into the local market to suppress the real demand. So when Minister Gaskin and his government took office, we had almost $700 million in our foreign reserves. The minister's last report, it's now to 400 and something million. So our foreign reserve is not growing, it's being depleted.
Yeah.
And that's the figures of the Minister of Finance.
And thank you very much for your comments. And if I can remind both of our guests, if we can keep our answers as short as possible, that way, and as direct as possible to the question, we can, of course, get as many questions in as possible. And I'm glad that you brought up the issue of sector performance. And I would like to get Minister Gaskin back on and ask him specifically that both data and commentators have all agreed that key sectors, especially sugar, as mentioned by our other guest, have been underperforming, causing the loss of the foreign exchange. Was the closure of some of these estates an ill-conceived strategy? That maybe, yes, maybe we need to close it down, but how we did it could have been done differently. What are your thoughts on that strategy, which has impacted the foreign exchange supply?
Well, yes, the foreign exchange earnings, or at least our exports, did decline in 2018, largely due to lower or reductions in earnings from sugar, molasses, and of course the largest one was gold. Gold declarations were down considerably in 2018. But we're looking at a $65 million reduction from export earnings in 2017. So we're looking at $65 million US. That is the figure that we're dealing with here. When we speak of our foreign reserves, which Bishop Edghill has just mentioned, those foreign reserves of the end of 2018 stood at around, I think, $475 million US. So, those metrics do not indicate the kind of crisis that Mr. Edghill is alluding to. And I want to say that, this talk of us inheriting a buoyant economy in 2015, at the end of 2014, our foreign reserves stood at around $650 million US. And 4 years later, at the end of 2018, it was down to $475 million US. So you're looking at $175 million US reduction over a period of 4 years. And I want you to bear that figure in mind, because I want to make 2 points in relation to that. One, that during the year 2014, at the beginning of that year, the foreign reserves were $750 million US, and they dropped by 100 million in just the 1 year. And we're not hearing a lot about that. We're complaining about the 175 million decline in 4 years, over 4 years, and no one is saying anything about the 100 million decline in 1 year. In addition to that, if we speak now about Gaisuko, and if you look at the decline in our foreign reserves of $175 million US. That is equivalent to the subsidy that our government has had to provide to Gaisuco over the 4-year period, because we were paying, it was over 30 Guyana dollars, which is about $150 million US in the first 3 years. So we cannot complain about our depletion of our foreign reserves and at the same time want to support the continuation of an unsustainable entity. Everyone, I think, recognized that Gaisuco was unsustainable. It could not go on. It was putting a strain on the treasury. It is unfair to the rest of the country to just keep an industry going that is unsustainable and unprofitable. And a big part of the unsustainability had to do with a workforce or an employment cost that exceeded the earnings, the total earnings of Gaisuco. So it needed to be rationalized. It needed to be consolidated. The least productive estates were closed because there was no, to have sustained or to have made those estates profitable would have required huge capital injections, huge capital investments, which Guyana could not afford at the time.
So, Minister, with the money saved from not subsidizing those estates, where was that money put in the economy to kind of lift other sectors to compensate for, I would imagine when you were closing those estates, you were predicting a lesser production, lesser foreign exchange. So therefore, we'll have to prop other sectors. What other sector did you prop? And that fund, that money that was used to subsidize Gaisuco, where was it put to work?
Well, let's just say that no monies have been saved as yet, because in the year 2018, which was last year, government had a massive severance bill to pay. Government also had to pay, subsidize the Gaisuco. So I think there was an additional $8 to $10 billion. I don't have the exact figure. That still had to be used in 2018 to subsidize Gaisuco. So it is not as if, once those unproductive estates were closed, that the subsidies automatically came to an end. And bear in mind also that we have been running, and this is not new, deficit budgets for the past umpteen years. And therefore, any savings in any particular sector does not automatically either take you out of a deficit or allow you to go and splurge in another sector. So it is not as if, there's an additional pot of money floating around the place with the closure of these 4 estates.
Okay. So I want to get in the Bishop on this subject also. And there is wide report that shows that Gaisuco was sort of draining the economy at a certain level, and something had to be done before what hits the fan. From the perspective of the PPP and your policy, how do you react to sustaining an industry, a sector that's pulling money from that can be used in other areas and so on, as APNU has done? They've done it. You've criticized it, but the fact remains that Gaisuco does have a drain on the general budget.
Well, there are a couple of things that we have to put in perspective here. Number one, Gaisuco, the estates were shut, and the world needs to know this, without an economic impact assessment being done. Number two, without a social impact assessment being done. Now, if you're going to make an economic decision that an entity is a drain on the economy, then you need to do the economic impact, how it will affect the overall economy. Because even though Gaisuco had to be subsidized, it was also bringing in substantial foreign exchange, even though not reaching its goals and its targets. So the closure of Gaisuco by this current administration was not an economic decision, it was a purely political decision. And that purely political decision has led to us having in our country at this particular time the loss of more than 32,000 jobs, 7,000 direct as a result of closure, 5,000 from spin-off activities from sugar, and then loss in the whole issue of construction, other services, and a whole range that would, and of course depression in mining as well as in forestry that has led to loss of about 30 to 32,000 jobs. That's the reality of what we're dealing with in Guyana. Our plan was to continue to work with Gaisuku to make it profitable. As a matter of fact, when Minister Gaskin's government came into office, they did a commission of inquiry into sugar, Gaisuku. And in that commission of inquiry, they did not even obey the recommendations, because the recommendations of that commission of inquiry never said closure of any estate. They said retool the estates, bring it to a level of viability, and then privatize it so you'll be able to sell something and bring in investment that is functioning. But they opted to go with the political decision as against the economic decision. And I think...
Bishop, if I can interject here, I've heard your presidential candidate mention on a few occasions on social media that were he to be elected, the estates would be reopened.
Yes, the Burbage estates.
Is that also...
estates will be reopened.
Is that also an ill-conceived statement, as I would think that APNU did when it, thought of closing the estates?
This has been properly costed. Now, you have workers who are not employed currently, and it's either you have to now give them welfare or you bring them back to work. And if you bring them back to work, you'll be subsidizing Gaisuku with possibly $25 billion in a 5-year period. And the welfare that you will have to dole out to those people who are unemployed is about the same or even more. So getting the estates reopened is restoring dignity to people and communities as against just the receipt of welfare. And at the same time, even the SPU, which is currently the Special Purposes Unit, which was established by this government, they have a bond of 30 billion Guyana dollars that they have borrowed for the recapitalization of Gaisuku. And that's a different issue altogether, because that is a matter that is in a gray area. Yeah. So the issue here is about approaches. Something had to be done with Gaisuku. Our model was an economic solution to the fact that you had to be pouring money into Gaisuku. You pour some more, you bring it up, retool it, recapitalize it, and then you privatize, in keeping with recommendations that were being made. Here, what we have is an APNU AFC who would have made a political decision. In the PPP's belt, where they get the majority of their supporters, it is almost viewed as a punishment to sugar workers for supporting the PPPC. So it was a political decision without any economic impact assessment being made. And that is contributing negatively to the present economic state of our country.
Good. Right. With that, I want to bring in a caller. I think, Devin, you have a caller, and the caller has a comment and maybe a question about this subject of Gaisuku, which is, of course, connected to the wider economy. So if the caller can make his statement and question as brief as possible, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, please give us 1 second as we bring in the caller.
Hello, caller? Do we have the caller on? Hello?
Yes. Okay. The question I have for you is as follows. We just heard a lengthy conversation about the government. How is it that the government is doing to stimulate industries that it currently have that is bringing in foreign currency? Because, for instance, fruits and vegetables, for the last 2 years, there has been zero import to the United States. What is
Do you have a
done
question?
to
Do you have a
stimulate
question,
the
sir?
industry?
If you can make your
The question is, what is the government doing right now to stimulate the resurgence of those industries that is bringing in foreign currency?
Good. Very good question. Thank you very much. I'll have our panelists answer that question. What is the current administration doing as it relates to boosting other sectors that can contribute to the foreign exchange? Thank you, caller.
That's correct.
So, Minister, if you want to take it first, I'll really appreciate it.
Yes, and I'd also, when I finish, like to respond to the comment made by Mr. Edghill about a political decision to close Gaisuku. But let me just respond to the caller about what is the government doing. We have, as a policy, been very committed to diversifying Guyana's exports. We have been promoting, we have been incentivizing, we have been working with various sectors, agro-producing sectors, agriculture sectors, such as coconut industry, for instance, such as the fruits and vegetables industry. Right now, and you know, there's big business and there's small business. We have been encouraging and working with numerous small businesses who are involved in processing various types of products, from peppers to casrip to juices, you name it, and to help them to access export markets, help them with their packaging, with their labeling, and generally with their marketing. These are not initiatives that will transform our economy overnight, but you have to start somewhere. We're also working with large-scale agriculture companies. There's tremendous interest in Guyana's agricultural sector. Right now, there's a huge company that's interested in planting corn and soybean in the intermediate savannas. This discussion has advanced a stage where I think we're both ready for that project to materialize. They have done their surveys, they have done their studies. I think it is now up to the government to conclude that arrangement. So there has been an effort to shore up the other industries. But I want to say about this issue about closing Gaisuku for political reasons. Nothing can be further from the truth. Why would any sane government decide to shut down an industry to punish voters? Voters who our government would like to win over. Why would we do something so ridiculous?
And I think that might be the question that everyone wants to know, you know.
Well,
everyone is asking the same question.
Maybe if I could come in here, Sally, that's the minister.
If we can have the minister complete his answer, that's fine.
Why would we have spent an average of $50 million over the first 4 years, or 2015 to 2018, just to keep Gaisuku going, before we realized that the amount was ever increasing? Every year it became more and more. And this did not include capital investments. And this was an industry that was bringing in an average of between 70 to 80 million US dollars, which was declining year by year. It did not make economic sense. That is why it was done. As I said, no sane government would shut down an industry and deliberately put people into unemployment. It makes no sense whatsoever. So this boogeyman that we're throwing out there, that is designed to, you know, get people excited and get people, you know, stir up ethnic insecurities and anxieties, I believe does not help our country, does not help our future, does nothing to heal the wounds that, you know, from 50 years ago.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, before I gave a minute to the bishop to answer you or to respond to you, was there an ethnic impact statement done? Was there a social impact statement done? Was there an economic impact statement done prior to closing these estates?
No, it was not done. We did no economic impact assessment or anything like that. But there was a COI, a Commission of Inquiry into Gaisuco. We've had numerous studies done from within Gaisuco as to how can this be made viable. And at the end of the day, it was simply not sustainable without a massive amount of capital investment. And that's why it was decided that the best thing to do would be to consolidate Gaisuco's operations into 3 of the most profitable estates, one in Region 3, one in Region 4, and one in Region 6, and to close the other 4 and to put them up for divestment. And we are still hoping that we can get investments, private investments, to keep the other estates going. The truth is, private investors are not even seeing these as attractive ventures. So it tells you a bit about, and this is without, with an already severed labor force. So it is difficult even to attract private investments, for those to continue producing sugar on those estates, because it is a tough one to sell. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Can Bishops, can you take a minute with your response? Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to first of all thank the minister for his admission that the closure of Gaisuco is possibly one of the most insane decisions that the government would have ever made. I also like to thank him for admitting to you that they did that without an economic impact assessment, without a social impact assessment, or without even an ethnic impact assessment of what would happen, while he's trying to claim that we are stirring up ethnic insecurity. It was purely a political decision. But I want to interject here as well. Normally, in the presentation of a budget, the budget is presented with a performance of the economy with sugar and a performance non-sugar. Traditionally, budgets are presented in that environment. So you're able to look at the economy with sugar and without sugar. And then you're able to look at the economy, what is happening in public enterprises that you have to subsidize, and without public enterprises. And the Honorable Minister would know that the prognosis of the economy and what was happening without sugar, as against what was happening with sugar, should have driven some amount of thought and review on the part of his government as it relates to their particular actions. What is important to note that the economy of Guyana today is not performing in a manner that could sustain economic growth. Everything is projected towards oil and gas. And without oil and gas, there is no hope. We were growing Guyana for 10 years at 5% without oil and gas. Without oil and gas.
Correct.
Guyana was growing 5% consecutive growth for 10 years up until 2014.
Yes, and we do understand, and I just want to get to some other question. Now, I understand that Minister Gaskin will be leaving in about 20 minutes. You have about 20 minutes more with us?
Yes, about half an hour to be safe.
Half an hour. Oh, that's great. So we've got. So I wanted to switch a little bit more on. We've talked a lot about the economy. We've talked about the foreign exchange. We've talked about key sectors, and I wanted to go, talk about some of the agencies that are responsible for investment and growth, and of course, Go Invest is a big part of it. So I wanted to ask Dominic, Minister Dominic Gaskin, why isn't there a Go Invest office outside of Guyana where investors are? The USA, Canada, UK, other countries that have tremendous wealth and people with wealth and Guyanese with wealth, yet Go Invest is sort of housed and locked up in Georgetown, Guyana.
I think it's important to create the investment climate first before you go about selling the country or selling a dream. We know the realities of Guyana. We know the strengths of our institutions and the weaknesses in those institutions. And we know what the doing business indicators say about Guyana. We need to fix those metrics first. We need to fix our home first before we run out and try to sell something that is perhaps not ready to be sold. And I am being very frank here, and this is not something new. So let's not pretend that, Guyana was the perfect investor's paradise up until 2015, and all of a sudden, it has been run down. We have done a lot of work in terms of institutional strengthening. We have done a lot of work with Go Invest to move it from where it was 4 years ago to where it is today. Today, it is a professionally governed and managed organization. Not perfect yet, but much, much better functioning than it was a few years ago. In fact, this was recognized by the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry quite recently when it presented Go Invest with an award earlier this year. So a lot is being done, but we have to be realistic about where we are, what we are, and we have to start repairing a lot of the damage that was done during years of institutional neglect before we can start really selling.
How long do you believe it'll take for Go Invest to be at the position you needed to be to stimulate further investment into Guyana and to create the jobs and have the fluidity in the economy that we all can be proud about, and it can help the man and the women on the ground? Because you've been around for 3 years. You've been around for 3 years.
It's not a question of Go Invest readiness. It's a question of our readiness as a country. When you start inviting investors to your country, you have to fix certain things. You have to have the attractive and competitive infrastructure, the workforce, the legal protection for certain types of investment. All of these things need to be in place if you want to be serious about investment. This is a massive task. It's not a question of PPP versus APNU AFC at this point. This is something that all of us as Guyanese need to recognize. We need to understand that, we have missed a number of boats during our first decades of independence. And we need to start fixing those things. Other countries are way ahead of us. Other countries that became independent in the 60s are way ahead of us. And you cannot stop neglecting something one day and expect to reverse all that neglect in a year or 2 or 3. It will take at least up to 2030 before Guyana is recognizably different to what it was, let's say, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the honest truth. It doesn't mean that no progress can be made in the interim. We're making a lot of progress. But we have to understand that this is a long-term thing. We have to stop thinking from day to day and from month to month. We have to look at where we as a country want to be by the year 2060. So there needs to be done, and we have to then proceed to take Guyana to that place.
And Bishop, I want to bring you here with regards to Go Invest. Do you believe that Go Invest has lived up to its mandate of significantly moving the needle on investments? And if so, why? And would the PPP administration look at a larger role of marketing Guyana through an international sort of agency, which would include the Go Invest, going global rather than just being housed in Guyana? What would be the PPP's position on these items?
Well, let me first of all remind your viewers, Go Invest is a creation of the PPPC administration. Go Invest was meant to be a one-stop shop where an investor, when he comes to Guyana, would be able to sit in one place, and all the various agencies are being coordinated through that one investment agreement. But let me answer two things. Number one, it would seem that the minister was not aware that apart from Go Invest being an agency in Guyana, every embassy under the PPPC administration had a trade and investment facilitation desk. Go Invest was present wherever we had a diplomatic mission. There was a trade and investment facilitation desk. Number two, Go Invest would make several trips to major commercial centers and capitals at trade fairs, making a pitch for Guyana. And the minister's explanation about institutional strengthening, and it will take until 2030, explains why we don't have any major foreign direct investment outside of oil, which we left since they are in government. This is about jobs and job creation. The bottom line of a government managing an economy is creating jobs, bringing in better jobs, ensuring that people are having job security, they're able to have disposable income. Foreign direct investment is needed. And Go Invest, as a creature of the PPPC while in office, had its tentacles and its arms outstretched through the various diplomatic missions, as well as roving missions around the world at trade and investment facilitation expos and events. We will continue to attract foreign direct investment. I'm sitting in the 11th Parliament. Minister Gaskin is the Minister of Business. We have not debated one bill that is creating the legislative framework to satisfy what Minister Gaskin was talking about, institutional strengthening and creating an architecture to better accommodate foreign investors. We haven't had one piece of legislation that we have debated and created any new architecture. Whatever is happening was what was there before. All they have done is heavily politicized the management of what was supposed to be a technical agency that interacts with investors. When the investment agreement is hammered out by the technical people, that is when it came to the Minister of Finance, to Cabinet for signature and approval.
And thank you very much for that comment. And as we all know, foreign investment...
Can I respond to that? Because...
if I could ask the question, and you can probably add your response because it's very connected. Foreign investment, of course, impacts the entire economy. It creates jobs, and it creates jobs by investment. Investment creates businesses, and there's activities. So it's a simple math. More investment it means more money, which means more job. However, the simple math shows that we have lost significant amount of jobs in the last 3 to 5 years, and it continues to offer hurdles to our economy. How is it that that your ministry and the major responsibility of that being Go Invest, how does it plan to reverse that process of saying, hey, we need to get more investment in, and not just be an agency that's looking to improve itself? It needs to improve Guyana and not itself.
Well, first of all, it's a myth that foreign investment is not increasing. The figures that we have look like this. In 2015, we had about $122 million worth of foreign investment. That reduced in 2016 to about 60 million. It increased in 2017 to over 200 and something million. And 2018, it increased again. So we cannot, ignore the facts. Also, this statement by Mr. Edghill that we have introduced no legislation designed to increase investments or strengthen our investment environment, it's absolute nonsense. I mean, up to late last year, there was about 5 or 6 pieces of legislation introduced in the National Assembly, which dealt with everything from insurance to banking to strengthening of the GRA and a number of other areas designed specifically to protect investments, to make Guyana a more secure place to invest in, and to deal with a number of what I call institutional strengthening areas. So it is not at all true to say that. And the other thing about Go Invest having its tentacles all over the world under the PPPC government, first of all, Go Invest still attends trade shows, still attends investment conferences, and still makes presentations all over the world, but does not have a permanent office anywhere in the world. And I can tell you from experiences with contacting various consulates and overseas missions during the time of the PPP administration, that you could never get any information on investments in Guyana or doing business in Guyana. It was absolutely useless. I've had personal experiences of writing and calling, let's say, for example, the UK High Commission in London in the early 2000s. And they were clueless as to what was happening in Guyana, couldn't provide any information, wouldn't return calls, wouldn't respond to letters. And this was reported throughout. So let's not pretend that we have come from some glorious era of investment, of an investment-friendly Guyana, and we are now in some big decline. And politicizing Go Invest, I think that's a joke. Everyone who is familiar with what Go Invest is today knows that it is governed by a board of directors. There are no politicians on that board of directors. In fact, there is a vacant position that was where the political opposition was invited to name a member to the board and never took up the offer. And this is true for all our state boards. The political opposition has been written to and invited to name a member to almost every state board and have declined that invitation. And Go Invest is one of those. But there's no politicization of the Go Invest board or the management of its affairs. And people who interact with Go Invest, you can ask them. We should not rely on politicians to give this kind of testimony, but you can ask the private sector about that, and I'm sure you will get an honest answer from them.
Oh, and then a related question, and this is from one of our online viewers, Mr. Danraj Singh. He said, notwithstanding what you've just said, and notwithstanding what the level of investment that you have worked on in the past 3 years, he wants to know where are the jobs and where's the job growth, and where is the improvement in social living, social services.
And when it comes to jobs, first of all, we don't have reliable data. This was something that has been ignored for many decades. In fact, we did the first ever labor force survey in 2017, and it showed a 12% rate of unemployment. It also showed a 56% labor force participation rate, meaning that only 56% of the eligible labor force, that is Guyanese aged between 15 to 65 or whatever the retirement age is, were either working or actively seeking work. And of that amount, there was a 12% unemployment. We have undertaken to make this a continuous exercise. So instead of throwing figures around the place about unemployment and lack of jobs, that we can have hard data to support employment in Guyana, because otherwise, we're just trading insults and it becomes political banter. So there's another report that will be published shortly, which will deal with the situation as it was in the third quarter of 2018. I'm not going to say that we are happy with, that particular frequency of reports. We should be reporting on employment data every quarter. But
I think the essence of the caller question is not producing monthly reports or annual reports, but it's more about the content of the report. Is the report saying that there are more jobs, there are more investments, and where is it trickling down to the man and the woman on the streets in Guyana?
No, I appreciate it and I understand the question, but what I'm saying is that it is only through frequent reports, when you have quarterly reports that contain all the data, that you can then say whether we are employing more people or employing less people, and which regions have more unemployment than others. And then you can target your policies specifically to address the shortfalls that the data shows. Unfortunately, without data, your decision making is at best haphazard. And we need the data so that we can fine-tune policies with job creation. What we're doing now is very general and non-specific because it is not targeted to specific areas or sectors, other than we are very clear that we want to target value-added sectors, all types of value-added sectors, and those especially that have export potential. But outside of that, we don't have enough labor force data produced on a regular basis for us to specifically target certain geographical areas and sectors.
Great. Well, with that, I want to invite Devin, who's our technical person on this platform, to read a few comments from our viewers online.
Yes. Okay, so we have some comments from our online audience. One person said, Bar Association calls on President, Opposition Leader, and GCOM to avoid constitutional crisis. Congrats to Minister Gaskin for participating on the panel discussion. We need more of this. Great program, very informative and balanced. Keep it up. Respect. I do feel the PPP will look at everything and say yes to everything. According to the bishop, the PPP created everything in Guyana, including the crippling of the sugar industry. PNC has a history of neglecting sugar workers, and recent public statements by PNC minister, only PNC people will get work. Why are there no plans to provide jobs to sugar workers? And I support Minister Gaskin's position that we need resilient institutions. I would go further and add such resiliency should outlast political cycles. And we also have a caller that's been on hold for a while, so we would like to bring him in now.
Thank you, caller, and please be as short as possible. We are running out of time, and we do have one of our guests, Minister Gaskin, who may have to leave shortly. So make your question as short and as brief as possible.
One second as we...
Let me see here. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, caller.
Hi, Salim. This is Sis Narayan Singh from Washington, D.C.
Hello, Sis. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Gaskin and Mr. Edghill. Very good conversation. But I wanted to get...
I'm sorry, but the audio is very bad, and I'm not too sure we can continue this call.
The question is basically around jobs. There's a lot of feedback. I don't know why. Anyway, the first question that I want to ask is basically around the growth rate. The CDP did say that Guyana had a fantastic growth rate in 2018. But how is that possible when the official statistics for 2018 has not been declared? And let me explain myself. 2019 budget was presented in November, before the closure of the year, and hence it had a guesstimate inside. The Ministry of Finance usually produce something called the end-of-year outcome report, and that usually comes out around May of the following year, which is about May of 2019. Thus, celebrating the 2018 number is a myth. So I don't know what Mr. Gaskin is basing his statement on, because there is nothing factual at this point in time with regards to the 2018 growth rate. This is a guesstimate. So I wanted to ask him a question. What is he basing his numbers on? The second question is around investment. If we look at the investment profile of Guyana from 2014 to now, which seems...
Sis, can we have the minister answer that question? I think it's a very specific question. Then we'll have him answer that question, and we'll go to another question after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, the 3.1% growth rate for 2018 was based on the very latest revised figures. It has not yet been officially reported, but what has been officially reported was that the first half of the year, growth was 4.5%. That is an official figure. And the second half of the year, was projected to, not the second half, the total year was to be 3.1% of those figures. So I don't expect that it's going to be less than that. Last year, we had a situation where the figures had to be revised downwards twice. But this year, we don't have any downward revision. And I expect that whenever the official report is published, that the 3.1 figure will stand.
Bishop, do you have a comment on Minister Gaskin's...
On the growth rate?
Correct. On the 3.1 growth rate and where he got it from and...
Well, this has been a gray area from the 2015 budget. Like Sis was saying, every year when we go to the Parliament and we are comparing figures, they are never accurate or final figures. They're all guesstimates as of some date that the minister could never verify if it's November 30th, December 31st, these guesstimates, and they would keep saying it's the best projections. But Minister Gaskin should be truthful and tell the viewing public every year since the APNU AFC government has been in office, they have never achieved their projected growth rate. It has been revised twice in some years, never achieved their projected growth year. So when the budget is read and you hear all these fancy numbers, we're expected to grow, this sector is expected to grow. When the actual figure comes out 6 months after the budget has been approved, it's always revised downwards. They are underachieving. It's been underperformance, and they have not been able to keep their projections in sync with anticipated outcomes. It's been a very difficult thing, and you know that if you are looking to do investment and you're looking to do business and you cannot have a sane, predictable reading of the economy, it's difficult to plan your investment. It's difficult to be able to nurture your even prospects of doing future things in the country. And it is the underperformance of this government that is under scrutiny at this time.
Correct. And Minister Gaskin, I wanted to ask you a question that comes out of that statement by the bishop. You know, what, and like you also kind of mentioned it, that there are some investor confidence issue, there are some environmental issue, there are some issues with taxes and so on that's inhibiting investors in large numbers to be attracted to Guyana. What can we expect from your administration moving forward in terms of correcting or at least reinstating investors' confidence at all level, at the policy level as well as the operational level, to ensure that we can have significantly more investment, so that you will not have to revise maybe your numbers, or at least you can achieve your numbers of 3.5 or even 4% growth of the economy?
Okay, but I want to make 2 points before I answer your question, because what Mr. Edghill just stated is not entirely true. In 2016, we had to revise our estimated GDP growth upward. We had projected, I can't remember the figure, but I remember very clearly that early in 2017, when we did the revision, gold production or gold declarations were higher than expected, and the figure had to be revised upward and not downward. So what you're telling the viewers is not entirely true. Again, this is not something that you have to rely on my telling you. These are facts that can be checked. You can look to see what was said by the government at the end of 2016 when we projected the GDP growth for that year, and look to see what it was revised to in the beginning of 2017. So it is not factual to state that we have never achieved our targets, and every single year we have revised downwards. Another thing, the world's second largest economy, China, I believe in 2018, has had to twice revise its GDP growth figures downward. So there's nothing sacred about your projected GDP growth figures. The more, I guess, diversified your economy is and stable your economy is, the more likely you are to be accurate in your projections. But when you have an economy that relies on a small set of imports a small set of exports or to drive that economy, then price shocks or so can easily cause you to vary the final figure. So I want to make that point. In terms of what the government is intending to do different to increase investor confidence, I want to say two things. Because what we had, and this may sound political, but I think most honest Guyanese will consider this a fact. We had an economic free-for-all for many years, for many, many years. And there was a kind of confidence, a misplaced confidence, was that you can get away with murder. You can do anything. You can splurge money and build huge buildings and sell nothing at all and launder money and do everything in Guyana's economy. And the law would never catch up with you. A lot of that has changed. It hasn't been completely eradicated, but a lot of it has changed. As I said, institutions are being strengthened. We do now have anti-money laundering legislation in place. We have Public Procurement Commission in place. We have a lot of things in place to limit or reduce that kind of false economic activity. And so there's a particular segment of the investment community that is no longer as confident as it was. But our legitimate investors, people who are invested in value-added industries, export-oriented industries, are investing. We can look at, up to yesterday, I toured the site of the new Pegasus hotel and office complex, where there's $100 million investment. This is by a local private investor. This is the single largest local private investment project ever in Guyana. I've visited many, many Guyanese businesses that are expanding their operations, from DDL, Banks DIH, to lots of big companies. Lots of small companies also are getting into all sorts of businesses. We are not going to see the results of those investments in the short term because, there's a gestation period when you begin an investment to when you complete the construction and the equipping of whatever it is facility you are investing in. So, but in terms of what we do differently, personally, I feel that there needs to be a more investor-friendly tax regime. I think we inherited a tax regime and we have lowered taxes on profits, but I think we can do a lot more especially to reduce the upfront taxation that investors have to pay on imports and those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of work that we can still do and we are prepared to do to attract and encourage legitimate investments.
Bishop Juan, yes. You've heard the minister speak on what he can do. And of course, I think he might have, jabbed you a little bit because of the what is commonly, a narrative on the ground that much of the businesses during the PPP times were not legitimate and they were propped up by, underground activities. Is that so? And what would the PPP administration do differently moving forward, if elected, of course, in bringing investor confidence? So we move from an economy of one or two investments to, hundreds of investments over a year's period.
Well, there are a couple of things, Salim, that I must say. One, I've noticed the Minister Gaskin have been saying things that what Bishop Edghill said or Mr. Edghill said is not entirely true. But not on one instance has he been able to prove by way of empirical evidence that what I said is not factual. He can't remember, he can't recall, he can't this, but he knows. So there is no empirical evidence to debate or to refute that I have made a statement that was inaccurate. That's the first thing. Secondly, as it relates to the claim that there was a free-for-all and there was lawlessness and it was narco trading, the Minister of Finance himself have said that. the private sector has challenged him to provide the evidence, because this government is strong on platitudes, but they never could provide the facts and the evidence. You know what is the evidence that the Minister of Finance has provided? Well, Dr. Clive Thomas said so, and some other commentator who is a PNC or WPA operative said so. Nothing documented. The local private sector has challenged the Minister of Finance to provide the evidence that these gentlemen and women who took risks to develop in Guyana and to help to grow our economy, that it was fueled by narco trade or underground activity. And the government of today have not been able to produce one simple thread of evidence. And here we have another minister of the government on a responsible program like this, repeating the same thing, but providing no evidence whatsoever. It's all platitudes, it's all political statements, it's all about embarrassing success.
What would the PPP do differently?
I can tell you what the PPP will do differently.
To bring back investor confidence.
I can tell you what the PPP will do. When we were there, the minister can tell you about job creation. We have spoken about the future, the sectors of the future. We could have told you that we created 9,000 jobs in ICT that never existed in Guyana before. The minister can tell you where one of his foreign direct investors, what amount of jobs. He's waiting on some report that is coming sometime in the future. An investor that comes here, we could tell you how many jobs Qualfund created. We could tell you how many jobs were in the call center at Linden, how many jobs were in the call center at Tain, how many jobs Teleperformance brought, and you could add it up and we could tell you where the jobs are. In forestry, we could have told you how many jobs were created as a result of a foreign direct investor who came, expanded the forestry sector, where people were getting payment for the log at the stump. We could tell you how many people lost their jobs as a result of change of policy since they came into office. So the issue about job creation and the numbers, the minister is not being factual with your viewers when he's unable to give you numbers. Because in an investment agreement that is signed between the government and an investor who's coming, he has to say what is the cost of his investment, how many jobs it will be created, and if you're having proper monitoring and evaluation, you will be able to know if the investor is fulfilling his agreement in order to continue to give him the concessions that he's asking for. And that's the job of Go Invest. So it is clear that Go Invest is underperforming or incapable or don't understand its mandate. What will we do differently? We have learned as it relates to expectations, because people have specific expectations. So one of the things that we will do differently is that we will be upfront in educating people on reasons for our policies, not just stating what the policy is, but educating people on the policy. Let's say, for example, the minister is talking about agro processing. You can't have agro processing in Guyana without cheap electricity. You cannot, the problem that we are having, the cost of electricity is the cost for fruits and vegetables being wasted in Guyana when it's seasonal. You cannot process because of the cost of electricity. To compete on the world market, we have companies that are bringing aerated drinks into Guyana, and they're selling it cheaper than aerated drink that is being made in Guyana because of the cheaper cost of electricity, both in Trinidad and in Suriname. It is the APNU plus the AFC that have killed the Amila hydroelectricity project, which would have brought down the cost of electricity to catapult agro-processing. The minister is talking about job creation. We have to look at it in the context of tourism. When we built the Chedijagan International Airport, or we would say the modernization of the Chedijagan International Airport, which is now a renovation job, where we've gotten less and we have spent more. And that's a fact. It's not just a political statement. We have gotten less and we have spent more. It was to ensure the cost of freight for some of the non-traditional products go down, because we wanted a longer runway where you could bring in bigger cargo planes, which means we'll be able to compete with the Dominican Republic. We could get our pumpkins and our pepper into New York at a cheaper price because the cost of freight would have been able to go down. So a non-traditional agricultural sector. Now, what we were doing these major projects, but I don't think we took enough time to educate the nation as it relates to why we're doing it and how it connects directly with people. We knew it as a government, but I don't think our people knew it. And that's one of the things that we do differently.
And thank you very much. And Minister Gaskin, these measures, as outlined by the bishop, seems very fundamental and sound, and seems like, it's like the first go-to strategy in trying to build investor confidence, reducing the price of electricity, looking at security, and those kind of things. Why hasn't your administration over the past 3 years look at these key areas and make some useful and meaningful interjection?
Well, we have indeed. It just doesn't fit into the narrative that the opposition and many of our detractors like to peddle. Security. Let's look at the most fundamental fear, the murder rate. The murder rate has gone down from, I think, in 2013, 155 murders for that year. So the next year, I think 140-something, 147. And the last year, I think it was 103. It has been going down every single year. And I use that because that is a statistic that, there's no two ways. You're either murdered, or you're not. It's not a statistic that you can play around with. There's a body, that person's been murdered, it has to be counted. So security, piracy has been significantly reduced under our government. The most recent attack that we keep hearing about, that took place in Surinamese waters. The figures that Mr. Edghill speaks about, the call center figures and so, we have those figures. To say that we have 2,000, and there were no 9,000 jobs in ICT. There were a couple of investments in business process outsourcing companies or call centers, and those may have netted in total about 3,000 jobs. We have figures for the expansion of those projects that we can share, but that's a drop in the ocean. We have about 15,000 youths leaving school every year. That is the scale of job creation that we need to be speaking about. So to talk about 1,000 here and 100 here, because you have the data from an investment agreement that was applied for, that doesn't give you the kind of data that I am speaking about. But like I said, our government has been doing a lot in many areas.
One thing the bishop mentioned specifically was electricity. And I know for sure that electricity in Guyana is one of the probably highest in the Caribbean, and of course, way higher than the rest of the world. How are we going to get that to a manageable dollar amount so that businesses can become competitive?
There are two major options that we are looking at as a government. We have already stated a commitment to 100% renewable energy, but we're also looking at, which is a new development, new as in post-2015, because of the oil that is being produced, there is associated gas that is part of that comes up with the oil. And it has been estimated that there's enough gas that can be piped to shore to fuel up to 200 megawatts of electricity, which is about 50% more than our peak usage at this point.
And so what price would that be delivered to consumer?
That depends, because the unfortunate truth is that a large part of the cost of electricity has to do with losses, both losses in the transmission as well as losses due to theft of electricity. So you can bring it, you can supply the electricity for free, but once it hits the transmission line and you have those losses and you have theft of electricity, it defeats the purpose of cheaper electricity. So that's a serious problem that needs to be tackled. But in terms of the cost, depending on the arrangements that are made, it could come in as low as about 5 or 6 US cents per kilowatt hour. And if we want to be smart about it, and if we want to locate heavy industrial activity close to where the generating area is, then that would certainly reduce the transmission losses, and you would be able to supply electricity at a very good rate for industrial purposes.
Forgive me, guys.
Thank you very much.
While work is done to reduce the cost due to line losses and to electricity theft.
Yeah, so we probably have about 15-20 minutes more of this show, and I've got an important question. We've got a few more questions here.
We have an in-house question for someone here. Sorry, but yes, we have an in-house question.
All right. So if that person can answer that question very briefly, would appreciate it.
Gentlemen, ministers.
Go right ahead, sir. You have 30 seconds to ask your question.
Oh, no, I have a lot more than that, I hope, because there's a very healthy conversation going on here. Minister Gaskin, I want to applaud you for, as you speak, you said for all Guyanese, which I hope that going forward, that whatever Guyana government does, it will be for all Guyanese, not just work for one party member or as stated prior before. And you know what I'm talking about. I attended the expo, the oil expo in February of last year. And Bishop Edghill hit something on the head where we hope we don't fall into the Dutch disease and just rely on oil and neglect the other sectors that has been carrying Guyana since its inception. Talking about the oil and making the people have a false sense of security that the good life is coming is totally wrong. My name is Chris Prasad. I am a founding member of Guyanese Overseas United, representing the diaspora here, and we're looking for the government of Guyana to represent all of Guyanese. We're looking for whatever government the people of Guyana elect to govern for the country and for the people.
And do you have a question, sir?
My question is, going forward,
what has... So I can get my panels to address them.
With the oil industry coming, what is the government done to prepare the youth to benefit from the oil industry in terms of education? Because nothing I've heard about that. I've only heard a few coming out of UG going to engineer classes covered by Exxon. We should be grooming these kids from the very low school
Thank you very much. Let's have the panelists answer the question. So the question is, what is the current administration doing as it relates to educating our youth and preparing them for day one of oil?
Well, one of the things that we have to understand is that an oil economy, or let's say the oil sector, the oil and gas sector, is not going to create massive employment. What the oil and gas sector is going to do is going to create massive demand in many different sectors of our economy, as well as going to contribute to government revenues, which can be used for projects and for other government services, for improving other government services, which will create employment. So it is not simply a question of sending everyone off to oil school and, having them come back as petroleum engineers. It is more a question of ensuring that our local businesses pay greater attention to things like standards and for the particular sectors, and getting the management systems certified and those kinds of things, so that they can get contracts with international companies that are coming in. It is about ensuring that our people, Guyanese people, are exposed to training, whether it's from the technical institutes in Georgetown, Linden, or in Berbice, or whether it's from university, or whether it's through other means, overseas training and so. And that is being done. It is never going to be enough, and it is never going to address all the needs of an oil and gas sector. We have been working on a local content policy that will prioritize employment for Guyanese, contracts for Guyanese, as long as capacity exists. And it will also prioritize building that capacity, whether it's training employees or whether it is building capacity of local businesses to supply contracts where Guyana currently does not have that capacity, and placing the onus on the international companies that are coming to Guyana to provide that training and to help to build that capacity. Those are the areas that we are looking at in order to prepare our people and our young people for what is happening in the oil and gas sector.
Bishop Edghill, are you aware of an active policy or an active strategy as outlined by the minister to protect the Guyana oil industry and to protect Guyanese jobs in the oil industry, since we are moving fastly towards that day one? Are you aware of any policy or strategy?
None as yet. None as yet. Let me just simply say, everything that we hear in Guyana about the oil and gas sector, it's coming. There is no local content policy that has come to the National Assembly, no legislation. We've had a sovereign wealth fund bill that was passed in the absence of the opposition after the December 21st no confidence vote, without the opposition being present, which will be repealed when a PPPC government is installed. We have the worst mishandling of the oil and gas contracts as it relates to the production sharing agreements that were renegotiated. We've asked a number of questions, but let me just say something. The minister spoke a little earlier, and this is what is laughable. The minister spoke a little earlier that he would get electricity probably at about 6 US cents per kilowatt hour. There is no feasibility study that has been done about using gas to bring electricity to Guyana. There is no feasibility study that has been done. With ExxonMobil, I was present when we asked ExxonMobil the straight question, after we hear the government talking about creating generators to be fueled by gas and to bring the price of electricity to ExxonMobil has said very clearly, they have not done the study. They don't know what it would cost. It's 200 plus kilometers of pipelines that have to come in. They don't know what it would cost. They don't know what is the demand. But let me tell your viewers, in the new agreement that this government has signed, we could only get access for gas for domestic use. We cannot create an international gas sector. We're not talking oil, we're talking natural gas. So we haven't even been able to quantify the amount of natural gas that will be available for Guyana, for the domestic market, and how we can use the surplus in the international market. But we have an agreement that it could only be used for domestic purposes. The incompetence of this government is putting Guyanese at risk. We are giving away our natural patrimony because we're not capable of handling these matters, and that is why we have a motion of no confidence, because the people of Guyana has lost confidence in this government in managing its affairs and bringing about prosperity for Guyana. They're out of touch with reality. We are long on conversation and very short on deliverables.
And on a similar note, similar question.
If I may, you really can't educate people by not telling them the truth.
Why don't you tell us the truth? What is the truth? Do you have a feasibility study?
No.
Do you have a feasibility study for the 6 cents that you were telling the viewers just now?
I wait until I can have it uninterrupted.
Answer that question.
I didn't interrupt you.
But tell us if you have a feasibility study.
Let's hear the minister, please.
Take the point and let me respond to what I wanted to say. First of all, local content policy. That has been consulted on twice. There are 2 drafts that are publicly available. And
but
the
it's
second
not in
draft,
the parliament.
It's not in the parliament. That doesn't mean
it doesn't exist.
I don't know about it. Means that you haven't been paying attention. We have consulted with the private sector, with the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, with a number of organizations. We have on the first draft, and we have consulted with them on the second draft. And we have now hired a consultant to pull together the latest set of comments that we have had and to make a presentation to government so that the final draft can be completed. So it is untrue to say that there's nothing and that it hasn't been laid in the parliament. And I never said it was laid in the parliament. I said we are working to finalize a local content policy, and it will be done soon. The issue of gas only being available for domestic use is absolute nonsense. The same regime that the production sharing agreement applies to the oil that is produced is applied to the gas.
You haven't read the contract.
Right? I have read it. I don't know if you have read it. And another thing that needs to be made very clear is that the contract was signed in 1999 by your government, and its validity extended until the last drop of oil was produced and the project decommissioned. That was the validity of the contract.
We're talking about a production sharing agreement. That's what we're talking about.
The production sharing agreement is what your government signed in 1999. And I can bring it and I can show you, it states specifically on that 1999 agreement, this is a production sharing agreement. That is what your government signed. And the company was under no obligation.
Is it a fact that the ACNU AFC government renegotiated a production sharing agreement, which there is a new agreement with ExxonMobil? Is that a fact?
I want people to hear the truth. You can speak after me. You've spoken before me. You've raised this matter. I'm saying to you, the production sharing agreement was signed in 1999 by your government. In 2016, that contract was amended, and there's now a new contract, which is pretty much the same as the old one. You can look through it. 5% of the clauses remain unchanged, and it is also a production sharing agreement, just like the first one. It extends now to not just ExxonMobil, but to the company and its partners. And there are some amendments. First of all, you are asking for a 1% royalty to be taken out of the production share, the government's production share. We are asking for a 2% royalty to be taken off the top. It's a 50% share on profit. The minimum in any year of that profit would be 25% of the gross income. In addition to that, in terms of domestic use of gas, whatever applies, the share of the profit oil also applies to the share of the gas. There is no differentiation. I believe where Guyana has an option is if our domestic economy demands it, we can force the sale of that oil or that gas for use domestically. I think that is the option that we have. But it does not mean that our share of the gas and our share of the oil is in any way different from what it is. So I think you may have to read it a little more carefully before you make these kinds of pronouncements.
And on the same subject of oil,
excuse me, sorry, Mr. Moderator.
And I'm kind of switching a little bit.
Sorry, Mr. Mar. We have a caller that's on the line right now. If I can complete
my question here, sir. Yeah. So there is a common understanding on the ground, and there is a general sentiment by Guyanese on the ground, as well as commentators, that the current administration is putting all its bet on oil, and as such risking and putting key sectors aside, not investing. If you look at investment into agriculture, it has dipped even in the last budget, and other sectors. So is that a credible assessment that this administration is putting all its bet on oil at the expense and at the risk of critical sectors such as agriculture and other sectors?
Not at all. Not at all. We have made it clear that we need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in technology. We've made that very clear that those are the priorities, as well as, of course, education, and not specifically for the oil and gas sector, but so that we can use the oil revenues and all the other spending that will increase spending in the local economy, and we can strengthen our other sectors. We have made it very, very clear that agriculture, tourism, mining, and generally value-added sectors are the sectors that we want to promote and strengthen. That has been made clear, and it is it can be seen from what is budgeted in those areas. We've seen our tourism budget increase year after year. We've seen visitor arrivals to Guyana increase. We are now seeing more investments in the tourism sector. And the same can be said for agriculture. It is not true to say that investments are not made in that sector. The president himself has been going around Guyana at every possible occasion and promoting agro-processing and agriculture, especially in the rural areas. So we have in no way given up on those sectors. Not at all.
Good.
We have a caller on
Bishop.
we have a caller on hold for a long time that we would like to bring in. So please hold as we bring in that caller.
Hello, caller.
1 second.
Hello.
Hello, caller. Are you there?
Hi, Salim. I actually thought I said to you I had a couple of questions and you cut me off, but that's fine. Let me get to the second question, which is the only question now that I have, the more important question on investment. Once again, I'm grateful to Mr. Gaskin and Mr. Bishop Edghill for this forum because it brings perspective to everything. But this is the point. The point basically is, my question has to do with non-oil foreign direct investments in Guyana and their figures to justify it. In 2014, it was the foreign direct investment, and most of it, actually all of it, was non-oil, was 42.8%. In 2015, it was 11.2%. In 2016, it was 1.2%. In 2017, it was 12.8%. And in 2018, it was 9.1%. I'm talking about non-oil investments here, foreign direct investments. So the Guyana, and this all came from the Guyana 2019 national budget, which, again, as I said, is a book of guesstimates, but at least the 2017 numbers going back would be solid. Clearly, this does not look like an economy that is attracting foreign direct investments. Mm-hmm. This brings to bear the functionality of Go Invest. I think Go Invest is actually failing at its job because if you compare Go Invest to any other progressive country that has a similar agency, they're doing exactly what the bishop is saying, which is getting out there and motivating the people about why Guyana is good. So can the minister explain?
Yes, if we can have the minister respond to your question, says.
Yeah, but can the minister please explain?
Yes. We'll have Minister Gaskin respond to your question.
No, but the question is this. Explain in details what he has done to make Guyana open for business.
Got you. And I think the minister has spoken about this earlier in our conversation. Maybe you can discuss it briefly again. But basically what Sace mentioned is that in 2004, the non-oil foreign direct investment was at 42, almost 43%. And by 2019, it's projected to about 9%. So what is it that Go Invest is doing to ensure that it's ready for to create the right process, the right strategy, the right platform for investment?
Well, first of all, we're acting as if oil investment is a bad thing. I mean, we've been the most ignored country in the world for decades. All of a sudden, we have investors tripping over themselves to come to Guyana, to invest in Guyana, and we seem to think it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Absolutely.
I've already said that this is good news for Guyana. It's going to almost double government revenues in the first year, and it's going to probably triple government revenues in the first 5 years, and it's only going to grow from that point. Additionally, it's going to create more. There'll be more money circulating in the local economy as more Guyanese are employed and as more local businesses are contracted. And all of those spin-offs are going to create expansions in other sectors. We've already seen our construction sector with double-digit growth last year. We have transportation sector. Those are key sectors that react to, almost immediately to economic growth. So it's good news. It's not bad news. Now, what you were trying to say, and I think that is what the caller was trying to say, your government is bad or is not looking good because all of a sudden most of the investments are in the oil and gas sector. We are not pretending that anything else is happening. I don't think any of our other sectors can compete with the level and the scale of investment sector in Guyana right now.
Mr. Gaskin, are you there?
Large investment. But there are many other Guyanese investing in many other areas that are outside of oil and gas.
But I think the difficulty is, and maybe Bishop can join into the discussion now, the difficulty is we're not seeing those investment translating on the ground and creating the jobs and moving the economy forward. There seems to be sort of a wait until oil comes and then we all going to get rich. So, Bishop, you want to respond to that?
Well, thanks for bringing me in because I've been quite patient. Because if we have a look at the allocation of time, I do have a concern about how that has been going.
We have fact checkers that will send you the data.
let me just say a couple of things. Number one, when we define the future, oil and gas, which came to Guyana under the People's Progressive Party Civic, was just one of the sectors. Let us remind the world, the finding of oil and the creating of the architecture for investment in oil and gas was done by the People's Progressive Party Civic while in government. But while we were looking for investment in oil and gas, we sought investment in tourism. We started to create the infrastructure for ecotourism, the special brand of ecotourism. We talk about the expansion of the airport, bringing branded hotels to Guyana, the building of the Marriott. These are all things that were sabotaged by the now government while they were in opposition. We talk about expanding information communication technology, bringing in e-governance, e-commerce, cheaper bandwidth, connectivity, bringing the country into an information age through the distribution of free laptops, one laptop per family, bringing in the fiber optic cable that linked Molson Creek with Charity across the coast. And of course, we had a difficulty with bringing in the cable from Brazil through Letem. It was broken in several spots and never got off. It's part of the reality. Hydroelectricity to ensure agro-processing, cheap, reliable, and renewable agriculture. Expanding of mining beyond just gold and diamonds into rare earth minerals, mining, plantation agriculture to bring in new crops, soya beans and corn, talking with Brazilian investors to use the savannas and the wide savannas to bring in investments. We're talking here about several new sectors added to sugar, rice, bauxite, gold, and forestry. So oil was just one of the new and the emerging sectors. As it is today in Guyana with this government, the only sector that is being discussed is oil and gas. Now, earlier, the minister tried to lecture me and to say that I was erroneous about the contract. Just ask any of your viewers to Google government's petroleum advisor, Dr. Jan Mangle, who was paid by the IDB to help to prepare Guyana for oil and gas. It was an IDB-funded consultancy. Just let any of your callers read what the government petroleum advisor has to say about the renegotiated 2016 contract, which they ended up having a signing bonus of $18 million, which was kept hidden from the public for almost 18 months, which they never disclosed and told the truth. Let the government petroleum advisor, which was funded by the IDB, read the writings, and you will see how we're at a disadvantage. So having rhetoric is insufficient to satisfy the fact that even with the one sector that everybody's hanging on now, especially this government, that will bring Guyana into prosperity, what we should really be getting, we are not getting. Mm-hmm. A 1999 contract that was signed was when we didn't even know if we had oil. It was to incentivize the sector to bring people here. In May of 2015, when we left office, oil was already discovered and announced. So when you sign an agreement in 2016 on a new climate where people are not looking for oil, but oil is here in massive amounts, and you are renegotiating a contract that basically put Guyana at a disadvantage, tells about the level of competence of those who are handling.
Well, thank you for that, Bishop. And of course, the PPP in 2015 did lose an election, and yes, but even with notwithstanding all those great ideas and all those plans, so again, it's not so much ideas, but it's policy and strategy, and of course execution. I want to switch gears now because we have just about 10 minutes more, actually 9 minutes more. I want to talk a bit more about the Guyanese that's not in Guyana, but that's in the Caribbean, in the US and Canada, UK, who can also be part of this process of helping with Guyana's economy. And the wealth of the diaspora is in the billions, and I think we can certainly make a contribution. So the question is to you, Minister. I know I was very instrumental in setting up and organizing and executing the Guyana Investment Conference. There were about 250 potential investors with portfolio of over $50 billion, and lots of energy, lots of excitement. Your government was new. There was tremendous enthusiasm of what's possible. 3 ministers came. You had one-on-one session with these investors. To date, as the person who managed that conference, to date, I'm not aware of any of those contacts translating into an actual tangible, touchable investment in Guyana. Can you say why Go Invest might have dropped the ball on this? It was a very, very intimate and very excited crowd who wanted to be in Guyana as soon as possible with as many millions as is required to set up their shops.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for that question, and we do appreciate the work that you did and your organization did in organizing that particular event. I think it came off very well, and we were very happy to participate in it. In terms of the investors who attended or potential investors who attended, I think what needs to be made clear is that every time there is this kind of investor forum, the vast majority of the persons who attend and the businesses that attend are interested in supplying government, whether it's services or product or something. So, and from the moment they find out that, you know, there is some competitive process, some competitive process that is involved, and, you know, we're not just going to say, okay, yes, you can provide this service, or here's a contract. I think they lose interest. So that would weed out, a considerable amount of the persons who were interested. Some of them did actually come down. Some of them did bid for contracts and various services. I believe some of them are actually have gotten contracts.
If I believe it, because I was in direct contact with many of them, I think what they were looking for was a higher engagement with Go Invest as it relates to them getting the right concessions, them getting access to land, them getting access to data, and so on. And I think that's when they called me and said, "Hey, I'm not getting anywhere, so I'm going somewhere else, or I'm going back to what I need to do."
Yeah.
So it wasn't an issue of in many cases it was not an issue of them seeking a subcontract from the government, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I was going to get to that. I just wanted to move those aside, because when people hear, you had 200 odd investors, they think, well, okay, all these people are here and you blew it. But there are also people who would have followed up. And I know Go Invest came back and we had a list of potential follow-ups, and those follow-ups were done. Information was provided, but I think gradually the interest died. Some of it had to do with the reality. Incentives in Guyana are governed by law. The concessions on various types of equipment or whatever, fiscal incentives, are governed by law, and they're not arbitrary or whimsical. And so, they once they found out, or once they got the information, wasn't perhaps what they were prepared to accept, or they found that there were other investments that they could make that would give them a better return. I think some of those lost interest. But I know specifically of one with whom I had a private discussion there. This was someone from Nearshore Americas, who was brokers for the call center industry, or the business processing outsourcing industry. And I did follow up with him. He followed up with us. He actually came to Guyana with a mission of about 7 potential clients. And we did have a good engagement with the local operators, local call center operators. And I think resulting from that, there were about 2 or 3 new accounts signed and expansions for about 300 or so jobs. I don't follow up on these things after, the connections are made. So I don't have all the specifics. Yeah. But certainly I can tell you that one for sure, I was involved in, and I remember when he came, and I was involved in meeting with the clients and making those connections. So I know that in particular did result in additional job creation, and some of the others. But selling Guyana has to be something that we do over and over again, and it has to be constant.
Absolutely.
Guyana is not an easy place to sell, and that's why I said earlier there are a number of things that we have to fix. We have to address the ease of doing business in Guyana. It needs to be addressed frontally.
That was the core issue of the conference, and that's what everyone was mostly interested in. And if I believe you're right, that was sort of your promise to those investors. Hey, we're going to make this as easy as possible for you. And I think, and I know we're coming to program time, but I think as an agency, you having 250 leads with $50 billion available, the onus has to be on you as against those guys who they have the money. You have to get into their pockets and get that money. So I want to
agree. My hands are up. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I'm not arguing. I want to get Edghill in this conversation too. PNC APNU, or the PPP is going to win the next election within the next 90 days. This 90 days is always moving forward, right? One more day every day. What is it? Where do you see Guyanese out of Guyana playing an active role with their wealth, their finance, their investing, their skills, and their experiences in moving Guyana's economy forward? Where do you see the likes of myself and so many others who have acquired so much, and even a sponsor of this program, Mr. Nohar Singh, who has been knocking on the doors of every government for the last 30 years, and it seems to be left out in the cold. How do you use us? We are 800,000. We are very wealthy. We are very skilled. How can you use us?
Well, let me first of all say, with the prospects of what are before us, and as a country, in terms of the vision for Guyana and where we're going, we have to use this special time of the new opportunities that will come with oil wealth to create a new infrastructure network for the modern Guyana. So we will need people with the skills and the technology, the companies, Guyanese, as well as internationally competitive companies.
And we are aware of that, but what are you planning? What can we expect that you will do to get us in Guyana, rather than just say that we need you? Because we've heard that many, many times before.
We're going to incentivize the remigrant approach. We have done it before. We had the remigrant scheme giving people opportunities to come home. We had the regime of your concessions when you return home, coming home to do business and partnering. And that is why we are waiting on the local content policy for oil and gas, because a lot of the Guyanese in the diaspora have developed themselves internationally connected and the rest of it. So we want to be able to have legislation that facilitates not only Guyanese living in Guyana, but Guyanese in the diaspora who has been constantly in connection with Guyana here. We want to talk about online training for universities. We have a university here in Guyana, and we're talking now. We need our professors that have migrated as a result of the brain drain to help to offer online training.
Yeah, sorry to have to cut you, but we are down to program time. I would like to Minister Gaskin, to respond to my question about how can we use the wealth and everything that comes with the Guyanese outside of Guyana. I hate to use the word diaspora because I am as Guyanese can be, and how do you use the Guyanese that's outside of Guyana?
Well, we would like Guyanese outside of Guyana to invest in Guyana. We'd like them to feel that their investments are needed and are... but
what are you willing to do to make that possible?
First of all, we have to convince you to invest in Guyana. You have to tell us what you need to invest in Guyana. We are aware that the investment climate, let's say in the countries in which you operate, is a little more friendly than the investment climate locally. But we are also aware that when it comes to the diaspora, your heart is in Guyana. And we want to facilitate your coming to Guyana, investing in Guyana, because we know that when you make profits, it's not necessarily going to go back to where you currently live, like with regular foreign direct investment. So we are bending over backwards when we meet Guyanese in the diaspora, but the problem is that there are legislative amendments that have to be made in order to maybe make Guyana a more attractive investment destination. And that is what we are examining. One step at a time, we are improving our institutions. We are trying to make it easier to acquire land, to acquire building permits, to protect minority investors, to protect investors generally. But it takes time. We cannot do that in 3.5 years.
Well, thank you very much for that. And again, like I said, we're running out of time. And it all starts with the not bashing the diaspora and not bashing dual citizenship and not bashing so many other things that can help the diaspora or the Guyanese out of Guyana into Guyana. With that, I want to thank our viewers. I want to call Devin in. He has a poll that he would like to discuss with our guests as well as our viewers. Devin, are you there? Can you release the results of a poll that you've been taking?
Yes, so the question that we asked to our live audience throughout the broadcast is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with the current state of economy? 1 to 3, 65% of people voted that they believe on a scale of 1 to 3 they are satisfied. 16% of people said they're satisfied on a scale of 4 to 6. And 19% of people said that they're satisfied on a scale of 7 to 10. And I would also like to read some comments that we had during the broadcast. Mr. Leon Saul said, "Great program, very informative and balanced. Keep it up, respect."
Thank you.
And Miss Annette Arjun also said, "Happy that agriculture and tourism are prioritized, Minister."
Well, great. Thank you, Devin, for that. And again, I want to thank all of our viewers around the world and in Guyana. And we pray every day for a better Guyana. We pray every day for Guyanese to ensure that they can live a dignified life with themselves and their family. We thank every day for leaders like our bishop and our ministers who are taking time out from their life to do what they're doing. We do appreciate that, and we would like to thank Mr. Nohar Singh as well as Globespan 24/7 and their team for making this platform possible, for making this bridge possible between Guyana and Guyanese outside of Guyana. And with that, I would like to say a wonderful weekend to both of you gentlemen, to all of our viewers, and to all of those who have contributed today. Thank you again. Have a great day, have a great weekend, and may God be with you.
Thank you. Goodbye.